My name is Brenna Carlisle, and I am 38 years old. On Thursday night, March 14, my Aunt Marla sent me a video with no explanation, no text, no warning. Just a file sitting on my phone while I was at my kitchen table, finishing a compliance audit for a physical therapy clinic that had mixed up 12 patient claims and nearly billed Medicare twice. I almost ignored it. It was late, close to midnight, and the only light in the room came from my laptop screen and the small lamp over the stove. My dinner sat untouched beside me, a bowl of soup gone cold around the edges. I thought the video was probably from the church fundraiser meeting I had missed that evening. Maybe someone wanted me to see the decorations. Maybe my mother was reminding everyone that I had paid for the rental tables. Then I pressed play. The first thing I heard was laughter. Not polite laughter, not the soft kind people give when they are trying to be kind. This was full, easy laughter, the kind people let out when they believe the person they are laughing at will never hear it. My brother Rhett was leaning back in a folding chair, grinning like he owned the room. "Brenna?" he said, lifting his coffee cup like he was making a toast. "She's not a person. She's a walking invoice with no real life." My sister Tara covered her mouth, but she was laughing. Then my mother, Daphne Carlisle, smiled from the end of the table and said, "At least Brenna has money. It gives her something to feel needed for." I paused the video on her face. For 5 years and 8 months, I had paid the mortgage, the insurance, the loans, the rent, the therapy bills. That night, I did not cry. I opened my bank records. And 3 weeks later, when the first payment stopped, nobody was laughing anymore. I did not answer Marla that night. I did not call my mother. I did not text Rhett and ask what made him think he had the right to say my name like that in a room full of people who had eaten off my money for years. I knew better. People like my brother never remember their cruelty the way you remember hearing it. They call it joking. They call it being tired. They call it everyone being too sensitive now. So I did the only thing that made sense to me. I saved the video, made a copy, and emailed it to myself with the subject line, March 14, Church Fundraiser Meeting. Clean, boring, searchable. The way evidence should be. For the next 3 days, I let the family group chat continue like nothing had shifted. Tara sent pictures of tablecloth samples for the April luncheon. Rhett complained about diesel prices. My mother reminded me twice to confirm the fellowship hall payment because Pastor Graves liked everything handled early. Nobody asked how I was. Nobody ever did, unless my answer might affect a bill. The 3 days told me they suspected nothing. The next 2 weeks told me something worse. They still expected everything. I watched quietly. Not in anger exactly. Anger burns too fast to be useful. This was colder than that. It was the feeling I get during a compliance review, when a clinic's paperwork looks fine at first glance, but one small pattern keeps repeating until the truth starts showing through the margins. A missing signature. A copied note. A charge that appears every month because nobody believes anyone will check. On Monday morning, April 1, the first payment was due. Rhett's HVAC equipment loan, $713. For almost 6 years, that amount had left my account automatically, while Rhett called himself a business owner, and my mother called him overwhelmed. I logged in before coffee. The screen asked if I was sure I wanted to cancel autopay. I clicked yes. That was all it took to become difficult. By 9:30, Rhett had called 6 times. By 9:42, Tara texted, "What did you do? Mom is freaking out." At 10:11, my mother left a voicemail, her voice tight and polished, the way it got when she wanted control to sound like concern. "Brenna, this is not the time to make some kind of point. Your brother has contracts. He has people depending on him. You cannot play games with family money." Family money. I stood in my kitchen and played those 2 words again. My money had become family money the moment they needed it. But my pain, my time, my life, those had stayed mine alone. That was when I finally understood. They had not depended on me because they trusted me. They had depended on me because they had forgotten I could stop. Please subscribe to support the channel. I bet you're watching this video right now while lying down with your legs crossed, right? If that's true, type 3. If not, type 4. Let's see whether I got it right. Alright, enough talking. Let's begin the story. I wish I could say April 1 was the first time I understood what the house had done to me, but that would not be true. The house had been sitting inside my chest long before the bank ever put my name on a document. It was a split-level brick place in Henrico County with a narrow front porch, 2 dogwoods in the yard, and a basement that always smelled faintly of sawdust and motor oil because my father had claimed it as his kingdom before I was born. Calvin Carlyle was not a sentimental man in the way people write about fathers. He did not make speeches at dinner. He did not say, "I love you," every time he hung up the phone. He fixed things. That was his language. A loose railing. A leaking faucet. A stuck drawer. A neighbor's mower that would not start. If something was broken, he got quiet and found the part that had failed. The last real conversation I had with him happened in that basement in late July of 2018, 9 days before his heart gave out in the parking lot of a feed store. I had come by after work to drop off Daphne's prescription, and I found him at his old metal desk, sorting envelopes into little piles. His reading glasses were low on his nose. A yellow legal pad sat beside his coffee, filled with numbers. "You always make lists like the world is trying to trick you," I told him. He smiled without looking up. "It usually is." Then he tapped the stack of bills in front of him and said something I did not understand at the time. "A house is not held together by walls, Brenna. It's held together by whoever tells the truth about what it costs." I thought he was talking about repairs. Property taxes, the roof he had been meaning to replace since spring. I did not know he was trying to confess without frightening me. I did not know the mortgage was already 4 months behind. After the funeral, people brought casseroles and sympathy cards and soft voices. My mother sat in the living room receiving comfort like a woman who had lost only a husband, not a financial structure. Rhett walked around, shaking hands. Tara cried neatly into folded tissues, and I went down to the basement because I needed air. The desk was still there. So were the envelopes. That was where I found the letters from the lender. Past due. Final notice. Loss mitigation. I read them sitting in my father's chair, with the furnace clicking on behind me, and church people murmuring upstairs over ham biscuits. Daphne could not refinance. Rhett's credit would not survive the application. Tara had no steady income to list, so the bank looked at what was left of the Carlyle family and found one name that made the numbers work. Mine. I signed because I thought I was saving my mother's home. I did not understand yet that I was also signing up to protect everyone else's version of who she was. At first, everyone called it temporary. That was the word they used because temporary sounds kinder than dependency. Temporary sounds like a bridge, not a room someone plans to move into and decorate. The mortgage was supposed to be the only thing. $2,186 a month. Drafted from my account, while Daphne stayed in the bedroom she had shared with my father and told people she was taking things one day at a time. I did not correct her. I understood grief. I understood pride. I even understood needing people to see you as stronger than you felt. Then winter came, and the furnace coughed itself half to death. My mother called me from the hallway, whispering like the pipes might hear her. "Your father always handled this," she said, so I paid the repair invoice. In February, the property tax bill arrived, and Daphne left it on the kitchen counter under a faded Virginia Beach magnet. She did not ask directly. She just sighed when I picked it up and said, "I don't know what your father would have done." I paid that too. By spring, Rhett needed help. His HVAC business had landed a contract, he said. A real one this time. But he needed updated equipment to take the job. $713 a month for the loan, just until cash flow improved. He used words like growth and opportunity and family investment. My mother said Calvin would have wanted me to help my brothers stand back up, so I did. Then Tara's marriage started cracking in public. She moved out with 2 kids and a storage unit full of furniture she could not afford to keep. Her townhouse was $1,475 a month, and she cried when she told me the children needed stability. I believed her. Children do need stability. That part was true, which made the rest easier to swallow. After that came speech therapy for my nephew. Insurance gaps, Daphne's prescriptions, truck insurance, school activity fees Tara forgot about until the deadline was tomorrow. Nothing arrived as greed. That was the genius of it. Every request wore the face of an emergency. Every emergency had a child, a widow, a brother trying his best, or my father's memory standing behind it. And slowly, without a vote, without a conversation, my life became the place where the Carlisle family sent its unpaid balance. They still called it helping. I called it that too, for longer than I should have, because saying the truth would have meant admitting that I had not saved my family from falling apart. I had built a floor under them, and they had started believing the floor owed them gratitude for being walked on. The first time I tried to name it out loud, I did it badly. Not because I yelled. I never yelled. I did it badly because I apologized before I even made the request, which is how you know a family has trained you well. It was a Tuesday evening in late 2021. I remember because I was sitting in my car outside a Kroger with a gallon of milk sweating on the passenger seat, staring at Rhett's name on my phone like it was a door I did not want to knock on. His truck insurance was due that Friday. $248. Not the largest payment. Not even close. That was the point. I told myself, if he could take back one small thing, maybe the rest would not feel so impossible. When he answered, there was wind in the background and the hollow clank of tools being loaded. I asked carefully. Too carefully. I said I was reviewing my monthly expenses and wondered if he could start covering the insurance himself now that his contracts were picking up. There was a pause. Then he laughed once, short and dry. Brenna, you know how business works. Cash flow isn't the same as profit. I knew exactly how cash flow worked. I also knew he had posted a picture 2 days earlier from a steakhouse in Short Pump, one hand around a bourbon, the caption saying, "Small wins matter." I did not mention that. I only said, I understand, but I need to adjust some things. By 8:17 that night, my mother called. Not Red, Daphne. She did not ask why I was reviewing expenses. She did not ask if I was struggling. She came in like a judge who had already read the sentence. Your brother has a family, she said. Tara has children. I have this house. You only have yourself. I sat very still in my car, the milk going warm beside me. You only have yourself. She said it like comfort, like proof that I could keep giving because no one would notice what it cost me. In her mind, my empty guest room was an available balance. My quiet dinners were disposable income. My not having a husband or children did not make me someone who might need support someday. It made me the support. The next morning, Tara texted me a link to a gray sectional sofa, $1,280 before delivery. Do you think this is too much? She wrote. She did not ask me to buy it. That would have been too honest. She just placed the want in front of me and waited for guilt to do the rest. For years, that was how they got me. Not with demands, with assumptions dressed up as helplessness. And every time I paid, they learned the same lesson. Brenna would carry it. Brenna only had herself. The Sunday after Marla sent the video, I drove to her house with a glass casserole dish wrapped in a dish towel on the passenger. That was the excuse I gave myself, because walking into someone's kitchen and saying, "Tell me why you handed me proof my family despises me," seemed too large a thing to start with. Marla lived 15 minutes from my mother, in a small ranch house with plastic tulips by the mailbox and a storm door that stuck at the bottom. She opened it before I knocked twice, looked at the dish in my hands, then at my face, and whatever greeting she had planned disappeared. You saw it, she said. Yes. She made coffee because people in my family make coffee when they are about to avoid the truth. We sat at her kitchen table, the one with little scratches around the sugar bowl, and for a while neither of us touched our cups. I didn't send it by mistake, she finally said. I kept my hands around the mug. I figured. I told myself I did. I almost texted you that. But I saw your name before I hit send. Her fingers tightened. I could have stopped it. I didn't. That honesty should have comforted me. It did not. It only made the room feel smaller. Why? I asked. Marla looked toward the window, where a wind chime tapped softly against the siding. Because I was tired of watching it. Not hearing one bad joke. Not stumbling into one ugly night. Watching it. She told me then that it had been happening for years. At dinners. After church. On holidays when I left early to finish work. Rhett would start, Tara would soften it with laughter, and Daphne would make it sound acceptable by pretending it was harmless. Marla said she hated it. She said she should have spoken up. But I didn't want to be next, she whispered. There it was. The whole family system, said plainly over weak coffee. I thanked her for telling me. I meant it. Then I picked up my purse. Marla reached for my hand, but stopped before touching me. What are you going to do? I looked at her, and for the first time, I did not feel alone, because no one had defended me. I felt alone because now I knew they had all known, and silence had been their vote. I did not answer Marla's question because the truth was, I did not know yet. On the drive home, I kept both hands on the wheel and let the silence sit beside me. The video had hurt. Marla's confession did something worse. It gave the hurt a history. It told me this was not one careless dinner, not one ugly joke, not one bad night caught on a phone. It was a pattern, and patterns were the one thing I had spent my adult life learning not to ignore. When I got home, I did not take off my coat right away. I went straight to the small desk in my dining room, opened my laptop, and created a new workbook. I named the file Carlisle Review, not revenge, not proof, review. That was the cleanest word I could find. Then I made tabs. Daphne, Rhett, Tara, house, medical, shared. My fingers moved faster once the structure existed. That has always been true for me. Chaos can make me freeze, but a column gives me somewhere to put the fear. I pulled bank statements going back to August 2018. I downloaded credit card records, Zelle transfers, canceled checks, insurance confirmations, tuition receipts, pharmacy payments, repair invoices, and emails with little phrases like just this once, and I hate to ask, and you're the only one who understands. I did not write down how each message had made me feel. I did not need to. The numbers were cleaner without my grief on them. Line by line, I entered the date, the amount, the recipient, and the reason. $2,186 for the mortgage, $713 for Rhett's equipment loan, $1,475 for Tara's townhouse, $620 for speech therapy and after-school support, $390 here, $248 there, a roof repair, a utility shut-off warning, a deductible no one had planned for because planning had become my job. By midnight, my eyes burned. By 2 a.m, the workbook had stopped feeling like a spreadsheet and started feeling like an autopsy. At 2:43, I highlighted the final column and let the formula run. 31,842.16 I stared at the number until the screen dimmed. The video had shown me what they thought of me. That number showed me what I had traded, to keep them comfortable enough to think it. 5 years and 8 months of my evenings, my savings, my weekends, my maybe some days. And for the first time, I understood something with perfect clarity. I had not been helping my family stay afloat. I had been teaching them that I was the water. The next morning, I printed the workbook summary and put it in a folder before I could talk myself out of it. Paper changes a thing. On a screen, numbers can still feel like a private shame. In your hands, they become evidence. I drove to Sloan Mercer's office downtown with that folder on the passenger seat, clipped shut like it might try to escape. Sloan was not a family friend. That mattered. I did not need someone to pat my hand and tell me what a good daughter I had been. I needed someone who could look at documents and tell me where the floor actually was. Her office was above a dental practice. all narrow stairs and framed county maps, and she listened without interrupting while I explained the house, the payments, and the video in the plainest way I could. When I finished, she opened the folder and worked through it page by page. Deed, mortgage note, refinance documents, bank drafts, voluntary transfers. Her pen moved in small marks along the margins. "The house is yours," she said finally. "Legally, there's no confusion there." I felt no triumph when she said it, only a tired heaviness. "I don't want to take it from my mother." Sloane looked over her glasses. "Then don't. Transfer the deed if that's what you want. But understand this clearly, Brenna. Giving her the house does not erase the loan. If she wants the story, she has to carry the cost of it." That sentence landed harder than any insult Rhett had ever thrown at me. She explained the rest just as cleanly. The money I had sent to Rhett, to Tara, to my mother's expenses, none of it was under a contract. It had been help, gifts, support I could end. I did not need permission to stop being useful. Before I left, Sloane slid the folder back to me and said, "There is a difference between harming someone and refusing to keep absorbing the consequences of their choices." I wrote that down in my car. Afterward, I went to the credit union. Eileen Cho still worked there, still wore a silver cross necklace, and remembered my father's file before she remembered me. She pulled up the refinance record and her face softened. "You carried more than people knew," she said. "I think my mother let them believe otherwise." Eileen did not answer right away. Then she turned the monitor slightly so I could see my own name on every line that mattered. "Paperwork does not care what people say at church," she said. For the first time, I believed that might save me. The night before the luncheon, I cleared my kitchen table and laid out 4 manila envelopes in a straight line. I had bought them at Staples on the way home from the credit union, along with a new black pen and a pack of binder clips I did not need. Buying office supplies for the end of a family arrangement felt ridiculous, but it steadied me. Some people pray with candles. I make clean copies. Outside, rain tapped against the window over the sink. Inside, my printer breathed out page after page, warm and smelling faintly of ink. I did not print everything. That would have been cruel and unnecessary. I printed enough. A summary page, key dates, totals, supporting documents, the kind of packet no one could dismiss as a misunderstanding without lying in front of witnesses. For Daphne, I included the deed transfer papers Sloane had prepared, the mortgage instructions, and a letter explaining that I would no longer make payments after May 1. For Rhett, I included his equipment loan history, truck insurance payments, and the tax penalties I had covered when he told everyone his business was expanding. For Tara, I included rent, childcare, therapy invoices, and the little emergency transfers that had never felt little when they left my account. For Pastor Graves, I made a thinner envelope. Not private details, just enough to show that if the room turned ugly, I had not invented the truth because I was bitter. Then I wrote the same final line on each letter. "I am not asking to be repaid. I am ending the arrangement you pretended did not exist." I read that sentence 6 times. It sounded colder than I felt, and kinder than they deserved, which meant it was probably right. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a text from Ivy. "Aunt Brenna, are you coming tomorrow? Grandma keeps saying you're giving a speech." I stared at her message longer than any spreadsheet. Ivy was 18, Rhett's daughter, the child I had helped keep in school, the one person in that house who still looked embarrassed when the adults got cruel. For one weak moment, I almost put everything back in the folder and told myself I could handle a little more. One more month, one more holiday, one more version of peace that only stayed peaceful because I disappeared inside it. Then I thought of my father's basement, his yellow legal pad, his voice telling me that a house is held together by whoever tells the truth about what it costs. So I wrote back, "Yes, sweetheart, I'll be there." I sealed the envelopes, clicked the pen shut, and turned off the kitchen light. For the first time in years, the dark did not feel lonely. It felt like a door closing. Sunday, April 7, arrived bright and cold. the kind of spring morning that looks warmer from behind glass than it feels on your skin. I parked behind the church fellowship hall and sat in my car for a moment, with the envelopes on the passenger seat. The building was already glowing with activity. Through the windows, I could see people moving between folding tables, carrying trays, adjusting flowers, laughing under fluorescent lights. It looked harmless from outside. Most things do, before you walk in. Daphne had made sure the room looked like a tribute. White tablecloths, blue napkins, framed photos of her and my father near the cake. A poster board near the entrance that read, "Honoring Daphne Carlisle, Faith, Strength, Family." I stopped in front of it longer than I meant to. There was a picture of her on the porch of the house, one hand over her heart, smiling like a woman who had carried every storm alone. Pastor Lionel Graves greeted me near the coffee urn. "Brenna," he said warmly, "your mother tells me you helped with the arrangements." I looked at the trays, the rented chairs, the printed programs, the flowers Tara had approved, and I had paid for. "Yes," I said. "I helped." Across the room, Rhett stood with two men from the church maintenance committee, telling a story with his whole body. He saw me and grinned too wide. "Careful," he called, loud enough for the nearest table to hear. "Brenna's here. She might bill us for breathing." A few people laughed because they did not know yet what kind of joke they were being invited into. Tara smiled into her paper cup. Daphne, standing near the cake in a navy dress, heard him and chose not to hear him. That old family talent. Only Ivy did not laugh. She stood by the dessert table in a cream sweater, arms folded, watching me with a small crease between her eyebrows. When our eyes met, she gave me the tiniest nod, like she had been waiting to make sure I had not changed my mind. The luncheon began with prayer. Then a few stories from women at church about Daphne's resilience after losing Calvin. My mother accepted every word with lowered eyes and a hand pressed to her chest. She was good at humility when an audience was present. Then, Pastor Graves smiled and said, "Daphne asked if Brenna might say a few words." My mother turned toward me, soft and expectant, already writing my role in her head. I stood, picked up the envelopes, and walked to the front of the room. For a moment, the room gave me the kind of silence people offer before a toast. Warm, expectant, trusting the shape of what they think is coming. I stood beside the little wooden podium with the envelopes pressed against my ribs, and I looked at my mother. She smiled at me the way she smiled in photographs. Soft enough for strangers, sharp enough for me. "Thank you," I said, "for coming today. My mother has been praised this afternoon for keeping our family standing after my father died, and I think it is important that the paperwork finally matched the story." The warmth went out of the room in pieces. I walked to Daphne first and placed her envelope in both of her hands. "This is the deed transfer for the house. It has been in my name since August of 2018, when I refinanced it after Dad died, because the mortgage was 4 months behind and no one else could qualify. I am transferring it to you now. The instructions for assuming or refinancing the loan are inside. I will make no further payments after May 1. My mother's fingers tightened around the envelope. Her smile stayed, but only because her face had not caught up yet. "Brenna," she said quietly, warning me. I turned before the warning could become a leash. "Rhett, Tara, these are yours." I set the next 2 envelopes on the table in front of them. Rhett opened his like he expected an apology. Tara opened hers slower, already afraid. I watched their eyes move over the pages. Numbers have a way of entering a room before people are ready for them. I have included a record of the payments I have made over the last 5 years and 8 months, I said. Mortgage, equipment loans, truck insurance, rent, childcare, therapy invoices, medical costs, emergency transfers. I did not estimate. I did not exaggerate. The total is $318,742.16. Someone near the back whispered, "Good Lord." Daphne stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "How dare you do this here?" Her voice cracked on here, because here was the part that mattered to her. Not the money, not the truth, the witnesses. I took out my phone. I am doing this here because my name was destroyed in rooms like this. I played 12 seconds. Rhett's voice. The laughter. My mother saying money gave me something to feel needed for. No one moved. When it ended, I put the phone away. I am not asking to be repaid. I am ending the arrangement you pretended did not exist. Rhett pushed back from the table. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said. It just makes me done. And then Ivy crossed the room and stood beside me. Ivy did not say anything at first. She did not need to. In that room, with my mother still standing and Rhett's envelope half crushed in his fist, an 18-year-old girl stepping beside me said more than any speech could have. It told the room that someone younger had been watching. Someone had understood the difference between family and appetite. Pastor Graves cleared his throat, but he did not ask me to sit down. Maybe he was too stunned. Maybe he had seen enough church basements turn into courtrooms to know when the truth had already taken the microphone. I thanked him quietly, picked up my coat, and walked out with Ivy beside me until we reached the hallway. There, she hugged me hard and whispered, "I'm sorry they made you do it like that." I told her the truth. They didn't make me. They just made every quieter option useless. The first calls came before I reached my driveway. I did not answer them. By Monday afternoon, Daphne had spoken to the credit union and learned what the house actually cost when no daughter was standing between her and the numbers. She refinanced what she could, sold my father's old boat trailer, canceled 3 subscriptions she had once called necessities, and stayed in the house, not comfortably. Honestly, Rhett called me a traitor for 2 weeks, then sold a second work truck he had been pretending was essential. Tara moved into a smaller apartment near the elementary school and took a front desk job at a dental office. For a while, they told people I had humiliated my widowed mother in church. Some believed them, but enough people had been in that room. Enough had heard the video. Enough had seen the envelopes. The story did not travel the way Daphne wanted it to. Marla texted me once, "You did what I should have done years ago." I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time before answering, "Thank you. I hope you mean that." Then I left it there. Forgiveness, I learned, does not have to include access. Life got smaller after that, then wider. I took Sunday mornings back. I bought groceries without checking 3 other households first. I slept without calculating who would be angry when I woke up. Ivy came over sometimes, not to ask for money, but to make pasta and talk about college. A month later, I went back to the basement of the old house to pick up the last box of my father's papers. I touched his metal desk and finally understood him. A house is held together by whoever tells the truth about what it costs. So is a life. I did not destroy my family. I only stopped paying to keep their lies standing. And when the payments stopped, the truth finally had room to breathe. Sometimes the deepest wounds in a family do not come from one dramatic betrayal. They come from the quiet habit of being taken for granted. Brenna's story reminds us that love should never require a person to disappear inside everyone else's needs. Helping your family can be beautiful. Sacrifice can be noble. But when your kindness becomes an expectation, when your generosity is mocked instead of respected, and when your silence is used as permission to keep taking from you, then what people are calling family may no longer be love. It may be control wearing a familiar face. The hardest part of setting a boundary is not always losing people. Sometimes the hardest part is admitting they were already gone in the ways that mattered. They were present for the payments, present for the help, present for the comfort you provided, but absent when you needed dignity, protection, or even basic gratitude. Brenna did not become cruel when she stopped paying. She became honest. She stopped funding a lie. She stopped carrying adults who had learned to confuse her patience with obligation. And in doing that, she gave herself back something more valuable than money. Peace. There is a quiet strength in finally saying, "I love you, but I will not keep hurting myself to protect your version of the truth." That kind of strength does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like a sealed envelope, a canceled payment, A calm voice in a room full of people who expected you to stay useful forever. If this story touched something in you, maybe it is because you know what it feels like to be the dependable one, the one who answers, the one who pays, the one who forgives first, the one nobody worries about because they assume you will always survive. But surviving is not the same as living. So tell me in the comments, have you ever had to stop carrying people who never thanked you for the weight? I would love to hear your story. And if this message meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember this tonight. You are allowed to set the weight down and still be a good person.